Welcome, greetings. Welcome to the Williamsville Superintendent Speaker Series. As you know, this year we focused on instruction and we had the arts already earlier this year. Our literacy speaker series has been moved because we had our snow days. So now that will take place in April. We will have our math superintendent speaker series in a very short time. And tonight we are very fortunate to have Mr. Kevin Lasky, who is our Director of Science, Engineering, and Technology, and STEAM, presenting our STEAM speaker series, Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Math. So we are very fortunate for that. Please make sure, well, number one, we welcome you this evening, but please make sure you let other parents know and community members that this will be housed on our district website. So if they have any questions about the Superintendent Speaker Series and our instruction in the district, they're able to access it there. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our presenter this evening, our director, Mr. Kevin Lasky. Kevin?
Thank you so much, Dr. Brownhall, for the warm introduction. As he had mentioned, my name is Kevin Lasky. I'm the Director of Science, Engineering, Technology, and STEAM for the Williamsville Central School District. And I thank you so much for joining us to learn more about our STEAM program and how it prepares our students for the shifting expectations, not only in the science classroom, but for their futures as well. So before I start the official presentation, I wanted to just go over what we'll be covering here tonight. I wanted to start with some background information because the expectations in our science classrooms are shifting. And part of that is part of a shift in the global career expectations. And with that came a shift in the New York State Next Generation Science Learning Standards. And after that came a shift to what we call three-dimensional learning. And once we kind of have that background foundational knowledge, we'll talk about how the STEAM program really does an excellent job of preparing our students to meet the demands of those shifting expectations. So it's a wordy slide and I don't like it, but I feel like it's incredibly important. So I wanted to read this to you because it's gonna come back as we propagate through our presentation today. So today's children are growing up in a world very different from the one even 15 years ago. Seismic changes in the labor market mean that we are living and working in a knowledge-based economy, one that demands advanced literacy in science, technology, engineering, mathematics skills, whether for application in the private or public sector. Technology has eliminated many jobs while changing and creating others, especially those involving mathematical and computational reasoning skills. One characteristic of these fast-growing segment of jobs is that the employee needs to be able to solve unstructured problems while working in teams. So I highlighted the last part of that sentence because it's incredibly important because one of the pillars of our STEAM program is to do exactly that. It's to help our students foster those skills to be able to solve those unstructured problems while working in teams. So this is from the New York State Education Department that kind of gives us some context for the shifting standards that we have seen. So in 2016, this is an implementation timeline. In 2016, you can see that the New York State Next Generation Science Standards were adopted. They began implementation at the elementary school level in September of 2019, and that continues still today up through the high school. So the big takeaway from this slide here is that the idea that our STEAM program, while the shifting expectations are certainly changing in the elementary school level, those expectations are going to propagate all the way up through middle school and high school and beyond for our students. So our STEAM program does a fantastic job of laying that foundation and preparing our students to solve those unstructured problems that they're going to face moving forward. So as we know, shifts in the standards yields shift in the classrooms, right? So now that we have New York State, adopting the next generation science standards, we're shifting what science education looks like in the classroom. So I showed this as a compare and contrast. On the left-hand side might be a science classroom from say 5-10 years ago. And on the right-hand side, you'll see, what we expect science education to look like now. Right. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that, traditionally we would be, teaching the students topics and they would be learning topics independently of one another. And we're shifting away from that to a more systems-based thinking, where students are solving a problem and looking at all of the topics or those core ideas that are involved in that problem, as opposed to learning one topic, taking a test on it, moving on to the next topic, taking a test on it. Right, we're moving to a more systems way of thinking because it's more real world in nature. They're solving real world problems, and real world problems don't just exist in a vacuum. Right, there's all of the different ideas that come together in order for our students to solve those unstructured problems. We're shifting from the teacher providing information to the whole class to students conducting those investigations. They're solving problems and they're engaging in that discussion. When you go back to that very first quote that I highlighted there, unstructured problems together in teams, it's incredibly important that students are engaging in those discussions because those are those soft skills that are going to be able to help them solve those problems in that team setting. We are shifting away from teachers posing questions with only one right answer to students discussing open-ended questions that focus on the strength of evidence used to generate claims. So again, we're shifting away from questions that only have one right answer to students discussing those open-ended questions. This is a perfect opportunity, and our teachers do this masterfully for differentiation. When you're not looking for a singular answer, there are plenty of opportunities for students to provide their opinions. It gives student voice. We're not looking for one singular answer. We're developing skills on how we process information, right? So we're not looking for only one singular answer. We're discussing those open-ended questions, and we're using evidence to generate we're using evidence to support our claims. We're shifting away from worksheets and more journal-based, posters, presentations, multiple opportunities for students to demonstrate their mastery of the content. Again, perfect, natural, differentiated instruction, plenty of opportunities for students with different learning styles and learning backgrounds, to successfully, to show success in our STEAM classrooms because of the various ways that students can demonstrate their thinking. And traditionally, we've oversimplified activities for students. We've taken complex things and we've boiled them down to the bare basics. This is what you need to know. And instead of doing that, we're exposing all of our students to these science and engineering practices, and we're scaffolding in supports in a collaborative way to make sure that all of our students can have access to these rich experiences in our classroom. And the bottom line here is we're switching from a teacher-centered model to a teacher-facilitated model. So instead of the teacher being a center of attention, you'll notice on the left-hand side multiple times the word teacher is highlighted. On the right-hand side, you'll see it's going from teacher providing to students conducting, from teacher posing to students discussing, from the teacher handing a worksheet to students creating journals and reports. The teacher is there to facilitate the learning. The teacher is not the center of the learning. So again, the shifts in standards are causing a shift in what our classrooms should look like. And our STEAM program does a wonderful job, on that right-hand side of this chart. So that leads us into this idea of three-dimensional learning. So each lesson in science moving forward should have these three components intertwined with them. It starts with the disciplinary core idea, and then includes the cross-cutting concept, and it includes the science and engineering practices. So these three dimensions we want present in all of our science lessons. I'm going to take just a few minutes and go through each one to make sure that we have, a unified understanding of what each one of these means. So the first one is that disciplinary core idea. So this is traditionally what we refer to as the standards. It's what we want the students to know. It encompasses the fundamental ideas that are necessary to understand the given science discipline. So if we wrap this up in one solid idea, the disciplinary core idea is just simply what we want students to know. The cross-cutting concepts, this is where things get a little bit more complex, right? These are the overarching themes that connect different scientific and engineering disciplines. So it starts with things like patterns. We want students to notice patterns in any problem that they're solving. We want them to make predictions based on those patterns. The second one there is cause and effect. We want students to recognize how one event has an impact on another event and vice versa. We want students to constantly keep in mind the scale, proportion, and quantity of the problem that they're working on. I'll give you a perfect example of this. If a student is working on a problem within a classroom, and you consider the distance of 1 mile, if they're solving a problem on the scale of a classroom, a distance like 1 mile is an extraordinarily large distance. But if you are looking at a problem that's traveling to the moon or traveling to the sun, all of a sudden that 1 mile becomes a very insignificant value, right? So this idea of scale, proportion, and quantity, it's really important that our students recognize from a young age, and we try to foster this understanding that 1 mile can be a huge significant portion of one problem and a very minute part of another, and that depends on the scale of the problem that they're working on. The idea of systems and system models. We want students to understand that they can look at problems as a system, right? And that's how we want them thinking about them. We don't want them thinking about them, in isolation with all of the systems, and that ties into the cause and effect. And they also can create models of what's happening in the real world to study those. The energy and matter, that ties directly into the systems as well. We want students understanding how energy and matter flows in and out of various systems and system models. The idea of structure and function. We want students constantly, identifying how the connection between the structure of an object and the function of an object. And it could be an organism as well. When you look at the fin of a dolphin, the structure of the fin is directly tied to the function of the object. And that becomes particularly important when students are designing something for a specific purpose, right? What does it need to do? And then you back solve to, okay, what does the structure need to be in order for me to get the function that I want? And we have a really good example of this coming up in one of our STEAM labs where the structure and function is pretty evident, which is really neat. And then the idea of stability and change. We always want students to look at things and say, is it changing? How fast is it changing? How stable is it, right? And ultimately, how fast a system is changing ties directly to its sustainability, right? Which is something that we'll talk about later as well. So the cross-cutting concepts, you'll notice that there's really no disciplinary core ideas here, right? This graphic is strategic because it weaves the cross-cutting concepts weave in and out of those. I'm sorry, my light went off here. The cross-cutting concepts weave in and out of the disciplinary core ideas because they're present in any lesson that we're doing because it's how students think, right? So the cross-cutting concepts, how students think, the disciplinary core ideas, what we want students to know. And finally, the science and engineering practices. So these are the major practices that scientists and engineers use to navigate and design and build systems. Okay, so these are our action verbs, things like acting, asking, defining, developing, using, constructing, obtaining, evaluating, analyzing, interpreting. Okay, they go on, right? But really what the science and engineering practices boil down to are what students are actually doing. All right, so when we return back to this three-dimensional graphic that we started with here, you have the disciplinary core idea, which is what you want students to know. You have the cross-cutting concept, which is how we want students to think about, those ideas and those problems. And the science and engineering practices are what students are actually doing to solve those problems. So that's gives us a good idea of how our classroom should look. Right. So again, we started with the shift in expectations. We're shifting from, a one-dimensional model to a more three-dimensional model. And now we're going to talk about, our STEAM program. So this is kind of like an overview of just STEAM in general. So for those of you who don't know, STEAM is an interdisciplinary experience that encompasses 5 disciplines, right? The STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and math. It's a hands-on problem-based extension of their science class that's rooted in rigorous curricular expectations. Now, this is really important because hopefully if you're the parent of a STEAM age student, which would be K through 4, they come home and they tell you that they had a great time in STEAM, that it's unstructured in nature, that they have plenty of choice and they have plenty of options in what they do, and all of that is wonderful. But when you look back at the three-dimensional expectational learning, right, everything they're doing, while it looks like quote unquote fun, it's rooted in rigorous curricular expectations. And that's really important to us that they're not just folding tinfoil, they're not just taping, they're not just, doing craft time, right? It's rooted in rigorous curricular expectations. And I'll take you through what some of those examples look like in a few minutes. Next, it's a dedicated space designed specifically to facilitate the creativity and collaboration, and I'll elaborate that on as well. And then, of course, it fosters that three-dimensional thinking and learning experience that we know is critical in the expectation moving forward. So a little bit more detail just about each of these 5 5 dimensions here. The first one is our scientific content, right? So the science is just the science content, and that's our disciplinary core idea, right? That's what we want students to know. And then we have the technology. One of the pillars of our STEAM program as well is our integration of technology within our programming. And we have a good example of that I'll show you in a few minutes of integrated technology that's used, right in, with a disciplinary core idea. The engineering and design process, that's one of the, 3 dimensions. The science and engineering process should be, again, present in every single lesson that we do. Art, when you think of art, traditionally we think of maybe drawing or we think of music, and that's all true. But we expand that definition slightly in STEAM to include the soft skills, things like the art of design, the art of innovation, the art of communication. Those are incredibly important as well. And again, when you think about the art of communication, going all the way back to, one of the first slides, problem solving in teams, that communication piece is incredibly important. Those soft skills, it's not just about the content, right? It's infused with those soft skills, so students can be successful, moving forward. And then finally, math, the application of math to solve problems, right? So the first dimension is the disciplinary core idea. And then the remaining 4 make up our cross-cutting concepts and our science and engineering practices. Right. So that's how STEAM kind of gets us to our 3-dimensional learning that we talked about. Okay. So now that we have an understanding kind of like, we walk through the shifting expectations in the science classroom. We walk through, an overview of STEAM in general. Now we're going to take a look at what STEAM looks like here in our district.
STEAM started about 4 years ago. It gives the kids a chance to really critically think, problem solve. We talk a lot about the engineering design process. For example, if we give them a challenge, like we want you to build a bridge. When we first started STEAM, they would want to know what the right answer was. They would want to know exactly how they were supposed to do it, exactly what materials they were supposed to use. Now, those kids that I've had for a few years, if I give them a challenge like that, they immediately get a pencil out, they talk to their neighbors, they come up with a plan, and they try it.
I wanted to keep going even though I knew I might fail. In my brain, I kept thinking, if I do this, I've got it, I've got it, I've got it.
4 years ago, there'd be a lot of frustration and tears. Now I see the kids kind of will laugh it off and they immediately start troubleshooting and thinking, well, how can we do it differently? In STEAM, they're really allowed to explore, make mistakes, and try again. It's very open-ended, which the kids I think really appreciate too. Tools that I was using with 3rd and 4th grade, I'm now using with 2nd and 1st grade. And we're kind of building those skills, and it's allowing them to do more sooner.
Current 3rd graders have had STEAM since kindergarten. We've been building that culture of inspiring each other and really that it's a community of learners and that we can work together to make things better. Everybody can walk out of here feeling successful because it's not competitive, it's helping each other to do their best.
Let go of the rolling marble so that it will collide with our target marble.
A lot of times kids will be very much like, is this a science or is this tech? And I'll say, well, a lot of things kind of are a blend of it. Using skills that they've learned in the classroom is kind of bringing it all together in a real world kind of way. They have to think of things globally and not just with a narrow focus.
Oh! Yep. Wow! STEAM has a lot of really positive carryover, not just in school, but in life. It's teaching kids to be creative thinkers. It's teaching them how to solve problems, not just on their own, but with team members, and how to solve a problem. Instead of just acknowledging that there is a problem, don't just stop it there. How can we fix it? How can we try to change it and make things better? And the mindset that's continuing that I hope they'll take with them into middle school and high school.
If you fail, you're like, okay, this doesn't work, so what other plan do we have? And if you get it wrong, you can go back and think of your error and then try to make it better.
I love having kids for 5 solid years of building a good foundation of science and engineering practices with these kids, and then they can see, oh, this is why we learned that in kindergarten, because now we're taking it a step farther and we can do this with it, but we're not forgetting what we learned, we're just kind of building with it. The learning they do here doesn't just stay here, that it actually continues on with them through their day and hopefully through their lives.
So that's a really nice overview of our program, just in a nutshell, and just some more details about specifically in Williamsville. For those of you who don't know, all of our students in grades K through 4 receive STEAM once per week. It's a dedicated location in each of our elementary schools that cultivates hands-on immersive learning experiences in a three-dimensional way for our students. And I'll talk about what those locations look like in a few minutes here. And finally, the classroom teacher accompanies the Class 2 STEAM to ensure continuity between the STEAM labs and the classroom instruction. It is important to realize that STEAM does not replace science education at K through 4. It's in addition to, right? So it's important that the classroom teacher is aware of what they're doing in STEAM, and that STEAM lab there is to support the instruction that's going on in the classroom. It's to add that 3 dimensions, to the classroom instruction. So 2 documents that everyone's very familiar with, both board-approved documents, the strategic plan and the DEI plan. And it's important to recognize that STEAM supports the work of both of these plans, right? So when you look at the idea of differentiated instruction to meet the needs of all learners, we've talked about that. When you're not looking for that singular answer, there's plenty of opportunities for students to, infuse their own, knowledge and provide a voice for students. Individual student growth. When you look at the science and engineering practices and the cross-cutting concepts, those are skill development things. They're not right or wrong, right? So it's very easy to, assess individual student growth when you're talking about developing those skills. So 2 out of the 3 dimensions of our STEAM classrooms, right, are skill-based, right? It's the science and engineering practices, it's the cross-cutting concepts, right? Those are skills we want to develop over time, and that's very easy to show individual student growth, when looking at those skills as opposed to a right or a wrong answer. Students are provided opportunities to express their identities and their backgrounds. Every student looks at problems from a different perspective. That collaboration piece is incredibly important, and every student has a voice in how they look at those problems. And then finally, one of our responsibilities for the strategic plan is to educate on critical factors that impact the personal and community wellness and sustainability of our environment. That's explicitly one of our cross-cutting concepts, and that idea of stability and change kind of cycles through all of our core ideas, with that cross-cutting concept of stability and change. So, our work here in STEAM, supports the district initiatives, that are outlined there. So I've talked about this a few times, and I really I wanted to go over and spend some time just talking about the thoughtful planning of the physical spaces themselves, right? So we really did a good job of planning out our STEAM labs in terms of down to the furniture that we bought. On the left-hand side, you can see the trapezoid tables that are organized in a collaborative way. While they're organized in a collaborative way, they're also flexible in nature. They can be rearranged by the teacher or the students to meet any problem-solving need that may come about. The center picture I specifically chose because you can see the students collaborating at the table, but it's also a good shot of the readily access to the supplies that the students may need. So again, very strategically, designed classrooms where, when you're solving a problem, these unstructured problems, right, you never know exactly what supplies you're going to need, right? So the students have ready access to their supplies at all time, a critical aspect of, that 3-dimensional learning and solving those unstructured problems. On the right-hand side, you see an open space, right? There's students sitting in it at the moment, but it's an open space because we know that sometimes unstructured problems require unstructured solutions. And those open spaces allow flexibility for the students and the teacher to, be creative in their problem solving. So those are kind of the 3 components that are, uniform throughout all of our STEAM labs in the district. And again, this physical setup of our STEAM labs are robust, dedicated locations in our elementary schools that are purposefully configured to foster problem solving and collaboration in a 3-dimensional way. Okay, so moving forward, I want to highlight 4 kind of pillars of our STEAM program. So kind of talked about what it looked like, but I really want to highlight kind of 4 aspects of our STEAM program that we're particularly proud of here in Williamsville. And that's how it addresses this idea of shifting standards versus shifts in the classroom. So we're gonna do another compare and contrast of like what a lesson would have looked like 5 or 10 years ago to what it looks like in a Williamsville STEAM lab, and we're going to compare and contrast and why it's different and why it is the way it is. The T in STEAM technology, we're constantly integrating our curriculum and our technology, and we have a very great example of that we're going to highlight. Third, we're going to highlight the vertical articulation and growth. This idea that we can maintain a disciplinary core idea, the same content, quote unquote, over multiple grade levels, but build up those science and engineering practices and those cross-cutting concepts over the years, to really show growth, with our students. And last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about, really what they're learning in STEAM are skills that they can transfer to any aspect of their life. That's really important to us, that, we're focused on those skills that really, lead to success in anything that the student might do moving forward. So the very first one we're going to talk about is the shifting standards leading to the shifts in the classroom. So we're starting off with the disciplinary core idea of sound is produced from vibrations. Okay, so remember, every lesson moving forward should have a disciplinary core idea, should have the cross-cutting concepts and the science and engineering practices. So this is another compare and contrast of like what this would have looked like 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, the student or the teacher would tell the students that sound is produced from vibrations. Again, that's addressing the disciplinary core idea. Something that's, we want to recognize too, is that we've always done hands-on experiences in science class, right? That's not necessarily new, right? But with the hands-on experience 5 or 10 years ago would look something like this. So on the left-hand side, we talk about the disciplinary core idea that sound is produced by vibrations, okay? And we are then talking about the science and engineering practices. Okay, so we're going to do a hands-on activity where all students are going to make a guitar. They're given the same set of supplies. They're given the directions on how to make the guitar, and the students complete the guitar. And it's important to realize that it doesn't make that a bad lesson necessarily on the left-hand side, but it's just, you have to be very thoughtful with what you're actually assessing. If you tell all the students that you're making a guitar, you give them the supplies to make the guitar, if you give them the directions to make the guitar, and you ask the students to complete the guitar, what you're really assessing there is the student's ability to follow directions. And there could very well be a time and a place to assess whether or not a student can follow directions, right? We certainly, when a student, shops at IKEA, we want them to be able to follow directions, moving forward. So there's a time and a place for a lesson like that, but it's not necessarily three-dimensional in nature. So now we're going to take a look at what this lesson would look like in a Williamsville STEAM lab.
I thought it would be really cool for you to plan and build and take home your own musical instrument.
So first grade, as part of our physical science unit, they are learning about sound and light. So last session, we learned all sounds are caused by vibrations and why there are different sounds and high and low pitch and things like that.
The jars that have more water have a lower sound, right? Because the glass can't vibrate as much.
And then this week, they are designing and building their own instrument that they get to take with them. The immediate goal of this lesson is for the students to apply what they learned about sound being caused by vibration. It fits in with our long-term use of the engineer design process so that students learn to plan, create, test, improve, modify through many iterations.
I used 2 plates and 2 jingle bells and 4 rubber bands to stick the plates together. It shakes. It makes a noise. I'm making a guitar and a maraca. The vibrating makes a sound.
I think long range, it helps foster in students the perseverance that they need to go through possibly challenging situations and think about what they know about it, what they can do to apply to that situation, and to not give up. That if it's not successful at first, what can you do? What do you know how to do? What can you change to make your end product or process successful in the end?
So that's a nice example of what this would look like in our STEAM lab. And now I just want to, again, just kind of put it next to, what it would have looked like 5 or 10 years ago to try to compare and contrast here. So, so instead of the teacher, telling the students, the teacher's posing questions. She had mentioned that it ties to the physical science unit that they're working on in their classrooms. That's not surprising at all. We want the STEAM to be an extension of what they're learning in their classrooms. But really the difference is in the science and engineering practices and ultimately the cross-cutting concepts, right? So when, in the example on the right, and what you just saw, instead of the students making a guitar, they're designing an instrument, right? Instead of students given the same set of supplies, the students are given supplies to choose from, right? Instead of students given directions, students are given guidelines. They're not given directions, right? Students complete the guitar. Students are refining in their design as they build. So these might look very similar on the surface, but the difference is subtle but profound, right? We're not telling the students what to do, right? We are giving them a framework from which to work, and their goal, right, is to create an instrument of their choice that's based on the fact that sound is produced from vibrations, right? And then this idea of the cross-cutting concepts, the very first one, students need to, connect the desired sound with the objects that they use, right? That ties directly into the structure and function cross-cutting concept that we talked about earlier. It's directly there, right? They need to say, okay, what do I want my instrument to sound like? And what objects do I use in order to reach that, right? Structure and function. What do I use to reach the desired outcome, right? Students are sketching their ideas, right? That idea of those soft skills, they're sketching and they're creating the model of the instrument. So again, these might look similar on the surface, but, the subtle differences are actually quite profound, to make this lesson three-dimensional in nature. The next pillar I wanted to talk about is our technology and curriculum integration, right? So we're going to use a third grade example from Dodge Elementary School that is focused on circuits. So the disciplinary core idea is that closed circuits can conduct electricity. So when a circuit is closed, it can conduct electricity, and when the circuit is open, it can't. You're going to see the following science and engineering practices. Students are going to work collaboratively to design a circuit using supplies. They're not told exactly what to do, right? They're given supplies. They're told to design a circuit. They assemble their circuit, right? They're identifying how they're going to open and close their circuits, right? They're identifying that themselves. They're not being told what to do. And then those cross-cutting concepts that we're going to see, they're going to take that circuit, the physical hardware that's sitting in front of them, and they're going to integrate it with the software on a Chromebook, right? So again, this is a third grade lesson, and our students are able to take the physical hardware, the physical circuit that they build, and integrate it with a Chromebook. And they're going to be able to make the connections that, the software behaves differently, based on the functions of their circuit, right? So you'll see that in the, in the example here, where again, there's different controls that the students can have based on what program that they choose to run on the Chromebook. So this is how this looks in.
So in STEAM, we are doing the Makey, which is where we have this circuit board and we have this red wire which is attached to this circuit board. So when my hand, when my finger or hand is touching the Play-Doh, it means that the circuit is closed.
Wait, look, the things are lighting up. As you touch that. So this is so cool.
So we were holding this and tapping the buttons because the electricity runs through from the computer all the way to the Play-Doh, and when you hold this and tap it, it makes sounds. And we're playing piano, and we're also doing a bunch of other things like geometry dash.
Wait, let's see who can beat the highest level.
It's really exciting because trying something new during STEAM. For us, we do science, and then we switch to. And then when we switch to T, we do technology. And then when we switch to E, we do engineering. And then when we switch to A, we do art. And then M is math. For all the wires and connecting, that's probably engineering. And then for the Chromebooks, that's technology. And then trying all this out, and it's kind of new to us, that's probably science, because science is exploring new stuff.
So that's a really good example there of the technology and curriculum integration there, where that same physical controller that the students have created are maybe playing the piano, they're playing Geometry Dash. There was a variety of other things that they could do that are engaging in nature. And again, what was the disciplinary core idea? It was that when they close the circuit, when they touch both ends, it closes the circuit and connects, the energy can flow. So that's the disciplinary core idea that's in a three-dimensional model. So again, much different than what we would have seen a few years ago. Okay, so the next pillar I want to talk about is this idea of vertical articulation and growth. So this idea where we can take one disciplinary core idea, in this case it's coding, so one disciplinary core idea that's stretched over multiple school years. So we introduce coding to students, as you're going to see in the video, at the kindergarten level, and you're going to see how it propagates up through the fourth grade level and how it builds on itself moving forward. So you'll see that here in the video.
I'm doing the code right now.
It's really awesome that the kids get to learn through play. So for coding, K to 4, kindergarten we start with the BBOTs. We also start with these little file folder games where they're able to kind of work themselves through a maze. We then move to the mouse or the BBOT, where the kids have little buttons on the device where it's forward, backwards, left, and right. And they learn that, forward is forward, and every time they add code, the bee or the mouse remembers the code. So if they tell it forward, forward, right, and they want to start over, they have to make sure they start over. Otherwise, it remembers everything, just like when you're coding. Every line stays there and you're just building on it.
Num, 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 num.
In first grade and later in kindergarten, we introduced Sphero, which Sphero is based on colors. So Sphero has different color mats, and it's coded based on the color. So the kids learn the colors and what they mean. So green, yellow, red are obviously start, slow, and stop. And then they have some other colors that do some fun things that they get to learn how to sequence them so that they can get their Sphero to kind of go along the mats and not end up going astray. So for the Lego kits, they start with the build itself. So they build their build complete with motors and this little smart hub. They then learn how to pair the smart hub to the Chromebook using Bluetooth. So once the students get to that point where they've coded it and they get to hit play, it's just total excitement and joy.
Make it faster.
Now try here.
We can speed up. Fiona. It works.
They don't really realize that they're learning the coding while they're doing the building. We use the Lego kits where they have an opportunity to kind of step-by-step build with the Legos, which that skill in and of itself I think is something that's really important for them to be able to kind of look at the screen, see the pieces, understand them visually, and be able to assemble it so that it matches what they see on their screen. There isn't the pressure of, okay, we have to have this done today. We can allow space for it to not work and then allow time for them to try again. In STEAM, we're able to say, it's okay. Like, what can we take away from the fact that it didn't work today? We're going to try again tomorrow. And then I think they feel that much more successful because they were able to figure it out themselves.
All right, so that was a great example of the vertical articulation and growth, one of the pillars of our program. And this is just one example of the disciplinary core idea being stretched over multiple grade levels, where in kindergarten, it starts with basic directions, forward, backwards, left, right. And then it goes to color-based directions. And then finally with the Lego build and code kits, right? So you maintain the disciplinary core idea and you slowly increase the science and engineering practices as well as the cross-cutting concepts. And not surprising at all about the tech integration in that, right? We just, one of the other pillars is the technology integration. When you get up to that fourth grade level and they're integrating their Lego build kits, with those Chromebooks, right? It's just seamless, integration of technology into everything that we do in STEAM. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see the depth and complexity, raises with the science and engineering practices and the cross-cutting concepts, while the disciplinary core idea stays the same. So that's another, way that, STEAM helps grow our students, in various ways. And the last pillar I wanted to talk about is this idea of transferable skills. So STEAM works to foster skills that are transferable to any situation, right? Now there's a variety of skills, and I'm just going to highlight some of them. Things like problem solving, right? That one's relatively obvious, right? The teamwork and the collaboration, those soft skills that we talked about are incredibly important. The troubleshooting skills, things like patience and resilience, this idea of creativity, this idea of growth mindset, right? This idea of productive struggle. And I saved this one for last because I wanted to talk about it last. And really, it incorporates a lot of these other skills, this idea of productive struggle. You noticed during the music example, the teacher said something that's a mantra for our STEAM classrooms, and that's that they plan, create, test, improve, and modify, right? They expect that they're going to have to improve and modify their designs as they move through. When they go into a scenario knowing that they're not going to be able to get the answer right away, that they're going to have to test their thoughts, that they're going to have to improve and modify their thoughts. When they go in like that, it really helps the students, develop that productive struggle. We want it to be productive in nature. We don't want anybody, frustrated to the point of no return, right? But that productive struggle where they're slowly working towards a resolution, where they're able to apply all those other skills, that productive struggle is incredibly important. And then finally, again, just bringing it all back full circle here, that the, employee needs to be able to solve those unstructured problems while working in teams. So just incredibly important that, these transferable skills, it's not really just about science, right? Any of these skills on the screen right now can be, applied to other disciplines. They can provide, to their real life, situations, and really be effective tools for them to use, as they progress through life. So kind of just to go back and kind of recap, everything we've talked about, tonight, all started with shifting expectations. It starts with shifting global expectations on our students. That requires the shifting standards. So we have the New York State adopted next generation science standards, and the adoption of standards requires a shift in classroom practice. And our answer to that at the K-4 level is STEAM. Okay, so STEAM is that robust, dedicated location in each elementary school. And we talked about why that's so important, because it's purposely designed to meet the learning objectives and foster collaboration and problem solving. But I can't stress it enough. We're still addressing the rigorous curricular expectations, right? The students may feel like they're having fun, but again, that's not what it's about, right? That three-dimensional learning really is part of fostering that creativity, and everything is rooted in rigorous curricular expectations. We engage students on a regular basis in that three-dimensional thinking and learning, okay? The disciplinary core idea, the cross-cutting concepts, and science and engineering practices. We talked multiple times tonight about the differentiated instruction. When you're not looking for that singular answer, there's plenty of opportunities for students to, have a voice and have a solution that's different from another person's solution and have it be just as acceptable, right? We're not looking for that singular answer. We're looking for, every student has the opportunity, to solve a problem in their own way. There's an emphasis on student choice. You saw that, whether it was from, what software they were controlling with their controller to which Lego build kit they did, whether it was, which instrument they build, right? It's all based on student choice. It's based on student creativity. It's based on collaborating together. And again, the development of those soft skills, you can't say enough about that when you're talking about working in teams. And then finally, one of the main pillars is you're developing those skills that transfer out of the lab: the patience, the resilience, the problem solving, and the productive struggle. And again, the mantra of many of our STEAM labs: we plan, we create, we test, we improve, we modify. So when you go in with that expectation that I'm going to have to improve, I'm going to have to modify, right? It really does allow all students at all levels, right, to just focus on that improvement and modification, and really makes this high level of science accessible to all learners. So with that, I thank you very much for joining us tonight and your interest in our STEAM program. And there is a Q&A portion. There is a Q&A section of the live feed here, and you're welcome to type any questions that you may have, and I would be happy to address them. Okay, so one of the common questions that we get is what is the difference between STEM and STEAM? Okay, so obviously we hear STEM and STEAM almost used interchangeably, and that's understandably so. But I had mentioned it kind of indirectly throughout the night that the focus on the arts, the focus on those soft skills, is an incredibly important aspect of what we do in our STEAM labs. Right? We just don't focus on the hard science. It's not just about the science. It's not just about the engineering practices. It's not just about math. Really, that's an idea of creating a collaborative learning community, right? And again, that goes down to the structure and how our labs were built and organized. And that A is very important to us because, again, it's the art of collaboration. It's the art of design. It's not just getting a solution, but it's working towards the best solution in a collaborative way. So, we get that question a lot, STEM versus STEAM. And STEAM, includes those soft skills and that collaboration, piece. Okay. Next question that we get a lot. So do students get science and STEAM? So I did mention this in the presentation, but I do want to make it clear that students do get both science instruction in the classroom as well as the STEAM lab. And like we had mentioned, their teacher actually accompanies them to the STEAM room so that we can ensure continuity between programming. What they're learning in the STEAM lab is a support for what they are learning in the classroom. And then final question here, is STEAM required by New York State, and do all districts have it? So, we talked about the shifting standards. The shifting standards are required by New York State, but no, STEAM itself, in and of itself, is not. We are incredibly lucky here in Williamsville to have a robust STEAM program that helps our students meet those expectations. When you look at those labs or collaborative settings where our students can go and really be immersed in those problem-solving experiences. So no, STEAM is not something that you'll see at every district, and we're very fortunate and lucky to have it here, and we've seen great outcomes for our students as a result.
Awesome. Was that the last question, Director Lasky?
I believe so, yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for a great presentation, a lot of information in there. I love the video snippets you had in there, also really highlighting what we do here in Williamsville. So thank you very much for that. And thank everyone for joining us this evening. We encourage you to join us for the mathematics speaker series, and that will be held on March 18th. And our ELA and literacy speaker series will be held on April 23rd. So again, thank you very much. Make sure your friends, family members, students, and colleagues know that this is available and will be housed on our district website. You all have a great evening, and thank you again, Director Lasky. Be well.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.